So we got some fuel at Lightning Ridge, pretty uneventful stay in reality. Next leg of the journey took us from Lightning Ridge down to Walgett, right-hand turn at Walgett, along to Brewarrina, and then to Bourke. So we kind of decided at the end of each day where we might like to be the next day or when we're moving on. This trip was kind of about getting to South Australia. This next leg of the journey was reasonably uneventful. We did a bit in Bourke, so I'll talk about that. And I'll get into my systems and procedures. And I saw a comment on some poor chap's video the other day. Someone said, why does everyone with a caravan think we need more caravanning videos? He had too many zeros. I think he meant 600,000 million. He went 6 million videos out there already. And I guess everyone's going to have different reasons for putting these videos up. So in my case, I'll never give tips or recommendations, just not my go, because what I like is going to be somewhat different to what others like. I'll explain how we go about it and what we do, but no recommendations or anything like that. I watched the tips and advice video yesterday, and you get time to do that while you're sitting in front of a screen doing stuff in the markets with the markets. I do believe anything that was relevant to us we're already doing, and some I would think that we're doing it better. Particularly that inside stuff. My wife's much smarter than me. She's got all that under control, and she's got a few others in there as well. But it doesn't mean I'm going to do mine's better than yours. I'm just interested to see, making a comparison as to where we're at versus what others are doing. So she's right up with all that stuff inside and got some really clever stuff going on in there. In my case, I just want to learn to speak a little bit better. I couldn't care if anyone watches it or not. Maybe my children will one day in the future. It's also a good place to store stuff. I mean, I can download all this stuff should I need to or want to. I'm actually quite intimidated by this speaking thing. Even sitting here, just the camera and I, nobody else at home, wife's gone out. Never been scared of much in my life, but not yet a fan of this speaking, so I've got to overcome that phobia. Don't know how I do that, so I'll just keep doing it till I either get used to it or like it a bit more. I think I might be getting a little bit better, maybe, don't know. Not saying and as much, but leaving big gaps, which I cut out and then it looks bad. Other people are just sharing their experience and what they see. So there's vastly different reasons. There's some folks, the creative and the deliverers of good information, they're also making quite a bit of dough out of this YouTube caper. Got no doubt it's hard work. Anything where you make money's hard work. Might not be hard physical work, but maybe it's hard mental work. I have a lot of stories to tell. I probably don't tell them that well, but I've got some really good stories that most other people wouldn't know. In a lot of cases, nobody would know. So I use these things, or this particular trip, I'm starting to use these things to segue into some of the stories that I want to tell and that are relevant. So what's relevant here at the moment? Well, there's a couple of things. As we left Lightning Ridge and headed down to Walgett, and for the second time I get to Walgett and didn't photograph the water tower, reason being I couldn't find anywhere that I considered safe to park, and safe is safe for us, safe for everybody else, and safe for us is not under trees where things will drop on you, or somewhere to park where I could go down a side street and make sure I do a loop. So gave that a miss again. There's a bit of grain growing around Walgett, not every year, we're in a bit of marginal country, but Walgett will either add to or prop up winter crops across Australia. They might grow a bit of cotton there too, I don't know. But certainly as we headed along to Brewarrina, a bit more grain, and then as we get a bit closer to the water and the Darling, the cotton starts. And I said in that previous video that there was probably I felt there was something controversial about cotton at Bourke. I had a quick look and there could well be more. Just heading into Brewarrina, we have a black rubber glove, shit paper, and jocks with more shit paper wrapped in. Now normally I would say that I understand what truckies go through with regards to the number of stops that are provided to allow logbook compliance and facilities at those stops. Even the road shoulders at times, you do a tyre, you're just going to have to block the highway or block half the highway because there's at times no places to put your gear off the road. Some of the time I get truckies positions, and maybe this isn't even truckies, who knows. This is pretty grubby. Visible from where we stopped, and we stopped here at just a little short rest area off the highway. We're just going to make a sandwich, have the sandwich, freshen up the coffees. So we're probably, 5-10 k's out of Brewarrina. And looking back where we came from, there was a huge truck stop, reasonable shitters and bins. So I don't quite understand why this happens. Righto, so the Bourke Cotton Farms. First one, Clyde Agriculture, Bourke. Mostly sold to the Harris family, so they originate from Morrell. Big farming family. The Bourke aggregation of Clyde Agriculture comprised properties Beamy, Janbeth and Latoka, more than 30,000 hectares, 20,000 megalitres of water licence. Got the feeling there was some ginning capacity there as well. Big focus on cotton production. Clyde Agriculture owned a lot of agricultural country. Thylungra, big station up here in Queensland, out near Windora, is one that comes to mind. Now, Clyde Agriculture was a subsidiary of Swire International, pretty big industrial investment operation based in the UK. On rough numbers today, that water licence, 20,000 megalitres, can be worth around about 160 million. Perhaps more. I've got a feeling I've seen somewhere that water traded at $19,000 a megalitre. Whether in that sort of quantity you'll get 19,000, whether in that quantity you'll even get 8,000, don't know. But the government's certainly big on the buyback at the moment. Okay, so that's the first probably major cotton farming operation, possibly not the biggest. Australian Food and Fibre, owned by the Robinson family. Now, this family I know very little about, just what I've read in the last few days on the web. They farm cotton and grain on Darling Farms, which is down there, and Janbeth, one of that aggregation out of Clyde, as well as Carbu at Bourke. And significant other farming interests in the Morrell and Border River regions. I would suggest Hay, New South Wales, and possibly other places. In 2021, they also purchased Oscott, which was a US-based operation. Owned Oscott in Australia, but it was US-based, US-owned. Essentially, Australians buying a wedge back from the US. So to fund the whole purchase, thought to be worth $500 million, they entered a joint venture with Canada's public sector pension fund, PSP Investments. They just keep popping up, don't they? I understand they have a phenomenal sum of money to invest. I think it's in the billions a week. So this is the same crowd that bought 60% of the second biggest egg producer in the country that I used to work for. The sale included 22,000 hectares of developed irrigation land and, wait for it, 143,000 megalitres water licence. So today, if we just do the math, that would be worth 1.1 billion. 1.1 billion. Just wrap your head around that. Australian Food and Fibre had also already purchased Oscott's Midkin assets at Morrell for an alleged $300 million back in 2019. And then this alleged thought to be $500 million deal in 2021. These guys, big operators. Big operators. The Robinson family have been involved in the cotton industry for more than 40 years, which kind of almost makes them a pioneer. That was back in those days when cotton was kicking off in Australia. So the controversial bit was that way back in 2006, 2007, the New South Wales government reduced the water rights by 60 to 70%. So that, of course, is going to make growing cotton a little more difficult, even though water use has become incredibly more efficient across all forms of farming as the years roll on. As you'd expect, that's what needs to happen. The Murray-Darling Basin, particularly up this end of it and down through Menindee, very controversial stretch of water at the moment. I do grow quite a bit of cotton at Bourke, and there was still a fair bit lying on the ground in their bales and tarps as we sailed on by. So we rang the Kidman Way Caravan Park, or Kidman Camp I think it might be called. We wanted to book, and this is where the systems and procedures come into it, and the lady said, no, we don't take bookings, we're not very busy, just turn up and we'll allocate you a site. Yep, righto, no worries. So off we went, and other places that we were looking at staying on, farm stays, still too wet, so we couldn't do that. So off we went to Kidman Camp. That was 45 a night, maybe 40 a night. I looked that up on the spreadsheet and put a graphic, and we turned up, and my wife said, the lady said we could get a drive-through. And it doesn't matter one way or the other, I just got to get a little bit more alert if I got to bag in. Oh no, she said, you can't have any of these sites here, we're going to get swamped shortly. We'll put you down the back. And down the back we were, which is fine, I'm not complaining. It was a fairly tough back in. I had to do a bit of a hijinks in and around one bloke and miss another bloke on my right. But anyway, we in a couple of stints. And she was right. There was a lot of people came in. So it's a simple thing, systems and procedures. But you need to have, and this is possibly not a good example, and we're going to go back to the Gundawindi bakery with the incorrectly labelled roll. There needs to be And I've been lucky. I've had a really good teacher on the systems and procedures front. There needs to be a set of systems and procedures that staff can follow, and my go has always been that those systems and procedures are also your training manual. So if one person is telling us that we're not busy, we don't have to book, but the reality is we probably should have booked. We need all those people singing off the same song sheet. And so it comes down to what procedures you have in place and how staff are trained using those procedures. Pretty boring for most, but can make business a lot easier and a lot better. And I often, I'm not the most exciting sort of guy around. I look at some of these places we stay and some of these places we run through and think about what would I do to make that better? What would I do to make that better? This is actually quite a pleasant place. Would we stay there again? Sure, no problems at all. But anyway, on to Bourke. A couple of things in Bourke. There's a big goat abattoir just up the road on the road to Cunnamulla a little bit. So we went past the Bourke Goat Abattoir back in 2018. Did a bit of a search on it when I got home, and it had closed due to the weather and a lack of stock. So only been home 4 months. Brand new abattoir closed down after 4 months. I thought it wouldn't be a bad opportunity to purchase some meat meal from a new operation, with no idea, of course, if and when it was going to reopen. I do remember talking to someone there, but I don't remember what the outcome of that was, but it took a while to reopen. In fact, it's only opened recently. So after it shut down, it was purchased by Thomas Foods International, which is a big company, I think, out of Adelaide, South Australia anyway. And 3 years later, so 2024, it's reopened. And we did hear on the radio that the Bourke Abattoir was currently killing 3,500 goats a day. Also processed sheep. Apparently 90% of the goats are farmed and 10% are wild. More on goats another time. So Bourke's actually experiencing a mini population boom at the moment, with all these people coming into work at the abattoir, a couple of hundred, which is making places like the bakery busier, the service station, pubs. So it's really good for Bourke. I bought a bit of goat meat meal out of Charleville. Gee, that'd be half a lifetime ago. Would be 30 years ago too. Back in the days when we were still using bags. It was putrid stuff. Goat meat meal has a pretty strong odour. Great bakery in Bourke. One of the good bakeries that we visited. We had visited it before. I don't know, 2018, 2019. Must have been during the week, because we headed in there about 11:45 this trip, after we'd been down and had a look at the cemetery, a bit more on the cemetery later, and out to the weir and down to the Port of Bourke, or the Old Port of Bourke. So we went into the bakery, and the best lamb pie I've had. Another cheap lunch for us. I think we went back for something a little bit nasty, cream donut or something like that. It's still under $20 for 2 of us. So we headed down and had a look at the Bourke Cemetery, and I had no idea that the Bourke Cemetery was as big as it is, and it is big, and divided up into its various sections. The Catholics hated the Protestants and all of that type of shit. The stuff that I don't know, I just don't get. But anyway, old Fred Hollows, he's buried under this particular rock here. I must have thought he wanted to get away. And I had no idea that Fred Hollows was buried at Bourke. And apparently Fred went to live at Bourke after his retirement. That's my memory of it. Fred, of course, provided sight to a lot of people in communities that could otherwise probably not afford it. One of the great Australians. It's easy for me to joke about him being under a rock that I didn't want him to get out of, but one of our great Australians. Bit of a walk around the Port of Bourke. So the Port of Bourke was the largest inland port on the Darling River. It was a pretty big part of the river trade, until rail and road transport offered better, faster, more effective, more efficient outcomes. Last commercial riverboat was way back in 1931. But I understand they developed the port, or they've redeveloped the port, put the port back together exactly as they can, the same as it was before. So you can just head on down there and have lunch. Goes out the Darling River. There were dozens of black cockatoos when we were there. just into the sun, so I didn't try that. But lots of black cockatoos and no doubt other bird life. Of course, we were going to do the Darling River run, which would have taken us off the blacktop, but the advice was it's pretty wet, and one of my ambitions certainly is not to be bogged anywhere, to be honest. It doesn't excite me. Not a hardcore four-wheel driver in any way, shape or form. Hardcore spreadsheeter, but not a hardcore four-wheel driver. I get my hardcore four-wheel driving action from YouTube, and I continue to be amazed at what these folks put their vehicles through. So we headed out to the weir. I don't know how often the Darling actually runs over the weir, but it was running over the weir, and I hear people say that that's a good thing, and I assume it is a good thing. I guess you'd have to live there or visit often to understand how often that happened. Because as I've already said, the Darling River, Menindee Lakes, and probably further south and southwest are pretty controversial pieces of water. Even go north to Cubby Station and other big cotton growers that rely heavily on and draw water from the system. And you can't forget the Bourke Water Tower and the Bourke Water Tower art. Pretty decent piece of art, and water tower art and solo art tracks us like flies to shit. Painted in 2021 and celebrating the achievements of one young Percy Hobson, who won gold in the high jump at the Perth Commonwealth Games 1962. What does that mean, I hear people say? Well, young Percy trained in his backyard, taught himself to jump in his backyard in Bourke. That's what makes it really amazing. Along with the fact that he was, along with Jeff Dinevor, who won a gold in the same Commonwealth Games for bantamweight boxing. He was the first Indigenous athlete to win a Commonwealth gold. Bit of a sunset across the road from Kidman Camp in Bourke. You can also go for a bit of a ride on the Jandra, a bit of a ride down the Darling, down under the North Bourke Bridge. And perhaps you'd be enjoying a cup of tea and a biscuit, maybe a ginger nut or a milk arrowroot. Got some fuel at Bourke, and we're of course in a falling fuel market, but Bourke would turn out to be the dearest we paid by a long shot, and I guess if I look at port zones, it's probably the furthest from Brisbane, Sydney, Newcastle, Melbourne, places where they unload the stuff in any case. So that was a bit unexciting, probably a bit boring. Video documents another part of our journey. The next destination's a little whistle stop, out stop service station along the Barrier Highway called Emdale. I actually really liked it, relatively isolated. Where you camp you can hardly hear the traffic, and of course it's on the way to Broken Hill. Always worried in this goat country that you're going to wake up with fucking goats up on your bonnet, which would not have excited me at all. Just a short update on the coffee death video yesterday, just so people don't think I've missed something. I forgot this yesterday. Note how we cut the bottom out, because under the lid is a lip and you can't get all the coffee out. So you get the can opener, cut the bottom out and get every last little speck of terrible shitty coffee out. However, we'll have to do it a little bit differently when we allocate the actual receptacle for my final resting place, because I want to go in under the lid. Unless, of course, maybe you can get a plastic lid over the top like that. I don't know. I'll let my wife figure that out. Or children, because I'll be dead, burnt and ground.